All right, welcome everybody to today's webinar on better and smarter buying decisions in legal technology. I am Bob Ambrogi. I am going to be the moderator today, and the topic we're going to be talking about is and there's Godard. One of our panelists just appeared. So what we're going to be talking today is about purchasing legal technology. And really, when it comes to purchasing legal technology for your firm or legal department or whatever, your options have never been greater. The past decade, and in particular the past few years, have seen exponential growth in the number and variety of products designed to help legal professionals do their jobs and serve their clients more efficiently and more effectively. My somewhat rough estimate is there's at least 4,000 products out there specifically targeted to the legal market. You may want to quibble with that, but there's certainly many thousands of them out there right now. But the downside to that upside is that the process of deciding on the best and the right legal tech is more challenging than ever. Not only is there this glut of products, but products are marketed sometimes with murky and somewhat misleading claims of what they do. So how can you make smarter buying decisions about legal tech? What resources are available to help you in this decision making? And how can vendors do more to help you in the process? That is what we're going to talk about today with our panel. Before we get to the discussion, let's get to introducing the panelists. And what I'm going to do is go around and ask each of you to tell us a little bit about yourselves and what you do. Godard, let's start with you.
Yeah, hi Bob, thank you for having me. And I'm Godard Abel, co-founder and CEO of G2. And at G2, we're building a website to be the trusted place you can go for software advice. And the whole idea behind G2, it's you can get peer advice. So when we started, we said it was going to be a Yelp for business software.
Thanks, Godard. Appearing by icon today, Stephanie Gudo. Stephanie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey everyone. Apologies, I don't have my camera on today. My 3-year-old is home in quarantine with me due to COVID, and I really wasn't sure how qualified he was to speak on this topic today. So I'm Stephanie Gudis. I'm currently the practice innovation attorney for Gunderson Detmer's Labor and Employment Practice Group. I was previously a class action litigator before I transitioned over to the way more fun world of KM and legal technology. And at Gunderson, I focus on really optimizing client value and driving technology innovation. So excited to be here today.
And we really appreciate your making the effort to be here today amid these somewhat challenging circumstances. So thank you for doing that.
Sure.
And Donna, Bala, how about you?
Hey everyone, greetings to all. My name is Donna Bala, CTO at PacerPro. I've been in network management and cybersecurity, wireless access points. So if you're in the IT field, that would ring a lot of similarities for you. What interested me in the legal tech space is the huge gap that I found between what legal firms are striving to achieve, given the demanding needs of their customers, and how technology could actually interface. And there are a lot of good challenges and problems to solve from a technological and from a use case standpoint. And that's what brought me to the legal tech space. But happy to chat with you all today.
Thanks so much. And last but not least, Andy.
Hello, everybody from Bend, Oregon. I'm Andy Wilson, co-founder and CEO of Logical.com, which is a disputes, investigations, and records request platform that anybody can use. And I've been in legal tech when it was maybe a couple dozen different products out there, Bob, not the 4,000 that are out there today, since 2001, from around there.
So Godard, let's start with you. I mean, you are in the business of helping people make smarter buying decisions. And you gave us a little bit of an introduction to G2, but tell us more about how you do that. How do you help provide people with more of the information and intelligence they need to make smart buying decisions.
Yeah. And I think the challenge for legal tech software buyers, or really any software buyers, is that there are just so many apps out there. You mentioned, Bob, about 4,000 different legal tech apps out there, which on the one hand is wonderful because as a legal practitioner, there's probably a purpose-built app that will help you solve your problem for your practice just the way you want. But the hard part is how do you discover the right app for your business? And also, how do you trust that vendor? And we believe in the world, there's a crisis of trust today. We don't trust Facebook. We don't trust our government. Sadly, many of us don't trust our health authorities. And I think that's also true in business where people tend not to trust sales and marketing. And I've been a software entrepreneur for over 20 years. So I'm guilty of this as well. I've always been selling and marketing software. And I've learned from some of the best, like Mark Benioff at Salesforce. But I think one thing we're guilty of as a software industry is we tend to overmarket our products. And we did a survey at G2 that said 95% of software buyers don't trust software sales reps. And but 94% also don't trust marketing. And so I think that's a big challenge.
So there's a 1% gap there between those that trust marketing and sales.
Yeah, and we sell a lot of marketers, and I start with the sales, and I'm like, hey, but don't feel too much better because 94% don't trust you either. But then, who do people still trust? And I think the reality is certainly professionally, the only people we really trust are our peers. And I think those of you, in the legal profession, it's going to be peers, at other firms that that you trust. And we also believe that applies to buying software and technology. You're probably going to go to them, but that's not very scalable, and you do have friends, you can ping them, reach out to them. But we wanted to bring that more to scale where you can get hundreds of peer opinions. And that was really the genesis behind G2. And now someone looking at a product like Logical, obviously Andy's product, there's 250 peer reviews written by real legal users. And we think that's what people are really going to believe. And that's going to help software buyers make, better, quicker I
was poking around the G2 site this morning, and there's a quote on there that says, "Why is it easier to get unbiased information about a $100 hotel room than a $100,000 piece of software?" Which is a great question. But how do you ensure that the reviews that are being posted to your site are in fact unbiased?
Yeah, and I think we do try to make sure. We think the key is that they're written by a real person, a real business professional. And so we do validate every review. Ideally, the person writing the review signs up with their LinkedIn profile, because I think for most of us today, that's our professional credential. And so, Bob, if you wrote a review on G2, you validate with LinkedIn, then we know it's really you. And it also gives us a lot of context on that review. We know they work for a law firm, maybe one with 500 employees or 20 employees. So it also allows us to put the data in context. And so we think that's the key. We try to validate it's a real professional writing the review. And once we validate, who they work for, we can also block fraud. Like if Andy tried to write a review on Logical, which he probably wouldn't do, but we would prevent him from doing that. Or if he tried to review one of his competitors. So we do our best, and no site is 100%, but we do reject 30% of the reviews that are submitted because either they're of low quality, because we also want, well-written reviews that provide some insight, or we suspect fraud. And so we do, everything we can to try to make sure you can actually trust the content. It's written by real users, real legal practitioners. And then also because it's ideally tied to their identity, you can reach out to them for more follow-up, by LinkedIn, or maybe you already know them, so that, you can get even more color from a real user.
Yeah. Having been a vendor yourself and having founded and run G2, do you have any insights on what vendors can be doing to better build or establish that kind of trust that's lacking there now, other than reviews?
Yeah, well, we certainly think encouraging authentic reviews, is a great way to do that. And we also always tell vendors, you don't want to be 5.0, because there's a lot of research done on consumer review sites like Amazon. I think if it's 5.0, no one trusts it. And they say the ideal range for conversion is somewhere between 4.2 and 4.6. I think we all know that as consumers, we use reviews. Something's too perfect, like we won't believe it. And frankly, if it's 3 stars and not good, we won't buy it, right? So, but I think the other ways is to encourage things like user groups. And the other trend I think we talked about is really giving your customers the opportunity to just try the product. And we think that's probably the modern way to buy and sell software. One, use peers to come up with your short list. And then two, why not just try some of the products? And I think more and more of the modern vendors actually enable you to do that, so you can really de-risk your purchase.
Yeah. And to what extent are people using G2 for that finding process or versus that validation process, I guess?
I'd say it's a bit of both. It's probably the top of the funnel where you're building your shortlist. Because I think most people, when they're buying software, they might narrow down to 3 they really want to engage with. I think G2 is a great tool for that. And then I think they also tend to use it at the end. We used to ask the vendor for references, and it's a little bit like employment references. I think the same things happened. And now when we hire somebody, yes, we still ask them for their 3 references. But then typically I also go on LinkedIn and see, hey, who do we both know? Who have they worked with? So you can kind of blind reference. And so those are the 2 phases that we see a site like G2 being used. One, create your shortlist at the top, at the beginning of the process, and at the end, do your final reference checks, and don't just rely on the 3 happy customers the vendor gives you.
Yeah. And let me just say to people who are listening to the webinar that, we welcome your comments and questions. We're all keeping an eye on the comment stream here. So if you have anything to add to the conversation or any questions you want to put to any of the panelists, go ahead and put them in there. And to the panelists, don't necessarily feel like you have to wait till I call on you to say something. But I will call Andy. I will call on you right now because as you say, you've been a vendor in the legal space for close to 2 decades now. You've been doing this a long time. And
you used to have hair when I started. Yes, that's correct.
I don't think you did. Did you have hair? I
did.
don't remember you ever having hair.
Well, before I met you.
But I've known you for many of those years. But you heard what Godard just said about the importance for consumers of being able to establish some kind of trust around a product. And I wonder, from your perspective as a vendor, what do you do to help create that trust or to help consumers, feel good about that decision?
Well, reiterate some of what Godard said. I mean, we, as he mentioned, we have a couple hundred reviews on his site. And that's, some of that comes from us asking our customers to give an unbiased review of Logical so that you can raise the trust bar, right? With prospects. That's number one. And then number two, and this is where I think every software category is moving, is more of this self-service, try it before you buy it, right? Just like, if you're going to go buy a car, I mean, some of the software can be very expensive. You're going to go test drive it before you actually decide to buy it. And software is undergoing a similar transformation across all pricing packages. And so, we've engineered our product so that you can do exactly that. You can just sign up and you don't have to commit to any long term. It's a kind of a pay-as-you-go thing. And if people like it, then they'll stick around and they'll continue to use it. And if not, then we got to do a better job.
Yeah. I mean, that try it before you buy it can be challenging for certain kinds of software because without being able to kind of load all your data or if it's a practice management system, say, I mean, you can go in and try a sandbox version of it, but it's not going to be the same thing as a full-fledged deployment would be.
We have that same problem because our product doesn't do anything unless you upload data to it. So
right.
It's the cold start problem that a lot of products have if you have to ingest information.
Yeah. Donna, what about from where you sit? How do you try and help, create that trust, encourage that understanding of what you're doing?
Yeah, I wanted to add the perspective from the law firm angle. What I've noticed is on top of what Godard and Andy talked about, there is a missing piece from the law firm side, which is, I've noticed that the law firms that are, struggling to button up on how their current work product and processes work, then they actually don't know what they want. They have not pinpointed, where is that efficiency in my flow that's costing me and the company. So then given that, they're not able to select the right technology vendor, let alone trust them, right? So I think there has to, so what we do at PacePro is go one step further and say, look, what is the use case you're trying to solve, and like what are the metrics you're looking to solve, and whether there is a direct fit between that need and what we provide. And also, I think the trust is built when we are very clear on what we provide and what we don't, because if there is a deficiency that we are not providing as a vendor, I think we build trust by making that explicit, and also by magnifying what we do provide and trying to understand, trying to get the vendor to understand it. Helps with building the trust. So I think the transparency from the vendor side, and also reaching out to the law firms to say, look, if you don't have your process ironed out and buttoned down, then you need to do that exercise as a homework, as a precursor before you actually go shopping for a technology vendor.
Yeah. Stephanie, you're in that seat.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just say, instead of focusing on selecting the right technology, I really try to focus on the attorney's problem and what the specific pain points are. Listen to that and how they describe it. And I try not to get distracted by the technology itself, and then, work backwards sort of from how they have defined the problem themselves, and then try to find the technology that fits in and is the best solution for that specific issue that they've described. So I think it's really important that they can be able to sort of come up with the problem statement in very simple terms. Here are the key issues, and then here's the solution. And then that's how you can pick the correct or most helpful product.
But how do you do that walking backwards process? I mean, how do you associate that problem with the technology that can address it?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? It's hard to do. I think it starts with listening. You need to reach out. I know whenever I've been in the process of trying to select a product, the first thing I do is I start with speaking with the attorneys, all different levels, partners, associates. I speak with paralegals, secretaries, docketing team, KM, library, really to get the full picture of what the top issues are. And then when you can see some patterns and things being repeated over and over again, that's when you can start to drill down and really narrow in on, this is the problem that's affecting many people across the organization. And then you can start to focus on, how do we fix that?
Yeah. Do you have, what kinds of resources do you use resources like G2 or, Capterra is another one that's out there? Are you looking at those kinds of sites when you're engaged in this process?
I haven't yet, but after this panel and learning the benefits and how it could possibly streamline the process, and I'll certainly be looking at that in the future for sure.
And also be great, Stephanie, if you write a review.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of the products you use.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Andy, I wonder again from your perspective. We talked a little bit about what you can do as a vendor, but I wonder, as a vendor, what have you learned about what law firms are doing right or doing wrong in their purchasing process?
Well, I think it depends on the size of the firm. The bigger they are, the more antiquated the process tends to be. It's just a product of just being around forever. Some of these law firms have been around for over 100 years. And so they're procuring software in a way that is not a modern approach. What Stephanie was just outlining is a fairly common tactic that we see in mid-market and large firm, where you do this kind of stakeholder listening tour, and you're trying to get like problems, and then you build objectives and some sort of key results around that. Like, okay, we need to reduce the time to do X, from Y to Z, something like that. The common mistake that we see, especially in the larger firms, is after they do that, they're like, okay, great. Now let's go create a spreadsheet of all the requirements that we got from all these stakeholders, thereby pleasing no one. And then we're going to send this spreadsheet out to this select group of vendors and ask them to fill it out, which, if you think about it, is kind of ridiculous in this day and age, to say, tell me all about your software through this spreadsheet known as the RFP. And so the smaller firms who are more agile and don't have this kind of technical debt that's been built up around procuring software, They are taking the approach of same problem. They're like, okay, we have a problem. We need something to fix it so that we can move from X to Y. And then they go to sites like G2 Crowd and they read reviews, and then they go and try the software to see if it actually works. So they put together like tiger teams of like, okay, we're going to take this paralegal and this associate to go after it and see if it works. And they put a time bound around that. And you see that in mid-market teams too. And I think that works incredibly well because you get to a decision much faster and you don't end up with this, lengthy, bloated RFP process. And then you get some software that, has something for everybody and therefore nothing for everybody, right? You please no one. That's
death to the RFP.
Yeah, I
absolutely would love to see that happen.
I will say trying to please everyone is an impossible task. And I do think that those massive spreadsheets for feedback can definitely be dangerous and should be used sparingly, depending on, the size of the organization, the culture of the firm, what the stakeholders want, et cetera. But I definitely agree with Andy that a free pilot is really the best way to understand and learn about a product. Just get in there, try it out. You could really attend every training session under the sun, but until you get in there and actually go through it and try it out, you can't know if it's the right fit, and you can't really adequately market or pitch it to others in your firm.
Yeah, it's like swap the proposal and the RFP for pilot.
Yeah,
But even with a pilot, isn't the challenge then getting the right people in the firm to participate in that pilot, or not?
Yes, always.
So how do you get around that? How do you do that?
Well, I think it, at least in my experience, goes to having great relationships with key stakeholders in the firm. And if you can get the ear of a practice group leader, somebody on the board, somebody on KM or the IT team that can really be a champion of the product, that goes a long way. And if you can get a really key stakeholder to send out an email or make an announcement on a practice group call or do anything to help promote it, I think you're going to get more buy-in from the attorneys in the firm.
And on my side, and this can sound a little bit self-serving, but I've seen so many RFPs and gone through, I don't know, probably hundreds at this point. Getting skin in the game financially is important for the vendor and the stakeholders, the prospective customers. So I don't have the data on hand, but just anecdotally, I know that free pilots versus paid pilots perform very differently. And the paid pilots, because they have more skin in the game, tend to perform better than the free pilots.
And I imagine, Andy, the opportunity there, or Stephanie, right? You could take one practice group, maybe even buy a license, let's say for 10 attorneys, and that could make it more real, right? Without making the full commitment. One thing I'm curious about, at G2 we cover many software categories, but I mean the other trend I think we're seeing is more people talk about the API economy. And obviously there's some apps, I imagine legal practice management, which is maybe like, I don't know, your ERP for a law firm. That obviously that probably is a slower decision, right? But then it seems like the trend is all, vendors are trying to just have easier and easier APIs. So it's kind of more plug and play, try different things, add different things on. And I'm curious, are you guys seeing the same thing in legal tech? Which in theory would also make it easier to try products and stitch them together?
It's too new. The product category is too new. Like the products are not mature enough to have that platform capability of API. That's number one from my perspective. And we have close to 2,000 customers, ranging all shapes and sizes. Some obviously are more sophisticated that could understand it. That's problem number one. Number two is you need engineering support. And in the law firm market, it is not common to find an engineer working inside of a law firm. It's just not the way it works. So you have a bit of a divide. I think in the future, Godard, absolutely. As every company becomes a technology company and every company has some level of API robustness to it, you'll have these kinds of plug and plays where you can take some tool and plug it into practice management, plug it into their e-billing tool, and you've got an ecosystem that way. But in my opinion, it's too new.
Yeah, you're certainly seeing it on the practice management front to some extent. I mean, a company like Clio, that's kind of its modus operandi. I mean, it is a core practice management platform with all the sort of basic essentials that you need in a practice management platform, but then it has an extensive network of partners through APIs that can add various kinds of functionality to the platform. But then there are other, there are competitors to Clio that do the soup to nuts approach. They don't want to do integrations. They want to just build it and deliver it as part of their platform. We were talking before about marketing hype. I mean, it seems like every day I get approached from somebody who says, we are going to be the Salesforce of law, or something like that. And I don't know what that means exactly, but they're all using pitches like that.
Yeah, and I do think a big part of the Salesforce value prop is, they have the app exchange, right? They have all these partners, and they try to make it easy for partners to extend. But it sounds like you're saying some vendors like Clio are starting to pursue that strategy, but it's not very common yet in legal software.
Yeah,
cloud is still pretty new. I mean, all the cloud penetration overall from all enterprise software is what, 20% of enterprise software right now?
Right.
And in legal, I would guess it's less than that, maybe 10%, maybe less.
Yeah.
And you need to be cloud to have those APIs to be effective.
Right.
Yeah, I also wanted to add about the personas, because I think that plays an important role within the law firm, because the strength in the law firm as it stands today is in the legal community, as in attorneys and paralegals and secretaries. And there is, at least to my understanding, even now, there's a lack on the IT side for clear representation, because we've reached a point where the knowledge from the legal community has to be delegated in some sense to the tech space, where they need a partner within their organization, which is the legal operations and the IT team. I think that team needs to be thought or considered very seriously, because many times, speaking to the point of pilot and free trials, I think very often the ball gets dropped because of lack of understanding, how the product's going to fit into their legal firm's ecosystem. So I think the strength of a good IT and legal operations team in the law firm side is important in this journey. I think it shouldn't. So a technology vendor and consideration for a purchase should really be a technology strategy for a law firm than a one-off purchase that they're trying to do it on the side. It's basically the mainstream of their business, just the way things stand from a digitization perspective.
Yeah. So we've talked about the importance of trusted peer reviews. We've talked about the importance of trying it before you buy it, a pilot of some kind. Are there questions that consumers of technology products generally, or legal tech products specifically, should be asking but aren't asking or aren't asking often enough? I mean, where do they fail to ask the right questions, or what don't they ask about that they should ask about? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know if others are asking this or not, but I think one of the things that I think is very helpful is to ask pretty much what other problems other firms or companies have experienced with the product during deployment or after the rollout. I think nothing's perfect. So just shedding light on how the vendor can describe what the issues were, and then more importantly, how they addressed it. And I think that really shows the level of service that you'll be getting from the company, and then, the level of confidence that the vendor may or may not have in their product. So that's a question I like to ask.
That's a good one. Does that come through in the reviews? I mean, when people are disgruntled?
Yes. Well, and we do ask, we always like, what do you like about this app? But we also ask what could be better, right? What are the problems? And I do think we also give vendors the opportunity to respond. It's just like consumer reviews, even like a hotel, right? Like if some guests complain, oh, the Wi-Fi was horrible, but the hotel jumps in right away. It's like, hey, you had a 1998, DOS PC, and we tried to help you, but we couldn't. But you want to see that the vendor cares, like Stephanie said, right? How did they help their customer, their client address those problems? And so I do think certainly asking them, like you are, Stephanie, but reviews are another medium to see, hey, how does the vendor respond when there's a problem? Because I agree. I mean, almost all enterprise software, there's always problems, right? And you want a vendor partner that's going to be there for you and solve the problems.
Yeah, that's a great question to ask. And then because it's cloud products and cloud is still fairly new overall, another good question around trust is reliability and uptime. We rarely get asked this, even from very sophisticated buyers. But what's your uptime percentage over the past in number of months or years? And then another more exclusive question that could actually be pretty revealing, because if you think about like modern software companies shipping code, not necessarily new features, but just shipping code is a bit of a heartbeat for a company. And so like the faster it's beating, oftentimes the better, not always, but oftentimes the better. And, I sometimes ask this question, like, what's your shipping velocity? Like, how often are you actually shipping code to production? And you can get more nuanced on that too, around, product issues, like what's your SLA to fix product issues, that kind of stuff. But that can give you an indication of like, is this company going to keep up with market needs and what we need and be around?
Yeah. Stephanie, I know that you recently went through a process, as it happens, of deciding to deploy Pacer Pro within your firm. I mean, is there are there takeaways from that process that are useful to this conversation here? I mean, what did you learn from going through that?
Well, it was a long process, and wish I had used G2 last year. No, it was very.
You still would have chosen Pacer Pro.
I still would have chosen Pacer Pro because they were really fantastic. I think the process was really what we talked about earlier. We did a pilot with a select group that we very strategically picked to make sure we had a mix of the right stakeholders in it. We did constant surveys to gather feedback from people, get rankings, and then ask them what they would or would not recommend. We asked for comments. We asked for the good and the bad. What did you not like? So we could pivot and we could fix things. And sometimes it was more on our end and how we were deploying it or organizing it, since we were rolling it out across 63 offices. So there really wasn't a one size fits all for how to roll it out in Austin versus Hartford. It was just a very different strategy for the target people in those offices. So yeah, I would just say constant communication, having a plan, getting the feedback, and then going back to the importance of references. And relevant references, I think, are important. And so by relevant, I mean like similar organizations in the same industry or the same size. Pacer Pro definitely connected us with their prior clients, and then they got out of the way. They set us up on a call, and then they were not a part of the conversation. So we could have a really unbiased discussion about the entire experience.
And then, and did you follow your own advice in that process of kind of starting first with trying to identify what the problem was before you started looking for the vendor to address the problem?
Yeah, we did. And I'm a former litigator. And so I had firsthand knowledge, and I had a lot of the frustrations that our attorneys had about not getting the documents that they wanted on time, being, charged multiple times for clicking on things. So I really had a good understanding. I was probably one of the complainers early on before I got into my current role. But yeah, I did go through the process of speaking with about 20 or 30 people to hear the problem in their own words.
Donna, what about that process of I mean, you during that pilot or as Stephanie just talked about, being able to kind of maybe both be of assistance but get out of the way a little bit at the same time.
Yep.
How do you approach that?
Yeah, so I wanted to touch upon some aspects that the customer may not directly ask because they take it as implied, right? For example, SOC 2 compliance. So many of the vendors in this space need SOC 2 compliance. So that's one thing that we are working on to make sure that we build that trust. This, like if you're a big law firm, then you know to ask for it. But if you're a smaller boutique, you probably are still trying to understand the landscape, right? So my point being, as a technology vendor, we have to ensure that the table stakes are in place, such as SOC 2 compliance, to Andy's point about availability status, how our various services are performing, and how various code systems are performing in terms of their availability and reachability, and how much of that we are able to be transparent with our customers. I think that helps build that trust. In terms of the pilot itself, again, I want to go back to that point of making sure that there is, to Stephanie's point, on clarity on what they are trying to achieve, because I think that's an important part of making sure that the pilot actually reveals to them in the form of numbers the improvement they wish to see, right? So I would really focus there, because everything else sort of follows from there. So the emphasis should really be on the metrics in question for our customer, and how we as vendor are faring against that, and the table stakes being one of the internal aspects that we need to take care. If you're looking at it from the product side, providing the clarity of what use cases we are catering to, whether it's orchestration of case data, or if it's providing visibility into important information related to a case that somebody might be seeking, right? So that pinpointing of the use cases that they're interested in and showing that we do provide it is an important part of the pilot program, because all these things are what help the law firm validate that when they actually adopt us, they're actually going to see it reflect in their bottom line, and which essentially should help with their client improved relationship.
What about something we haven't really talked about, but to what extent do customer service, customer support, those kinds of factors play into this, or should they play into this? I mean, Godard, what is that something you're asking people to talk about in their reviews, and how important is that to purchasers?
I think it is very important, because most software doesn't just work out of the box, right? You do want good support, or as Andy mentioned, there's always innovation, there's new versions. So I think you do want good, strong support and service. So we do ask every reviewer, specifically rate the quality of the support and service. And I do think that's something good to get from peers, right? Because it's hard. If you ask a sales rep, like, is your support great? Obviously, they're going to say yes. But so I do think that's a good point where you can reference, peer references, peer reviews can give you insight on, hey, do they really deliver on that?
Yeah, Andy, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, lots of thoughts on that. But I'll summarize it. I think, legal tech as a market is still a fairly immature market, and the customers that you're serving are sometimes not the most technical. They went to law school, not engineering school, right? And I think because of that, and because of the newness of the technology, they need more of a helping hand than maybe others. And so support is almost a required element to almost every legal tech software these days, more so than you would expect it with a Monday.com, or Asana. You probably don't need that much, because those product categories are way more mature than many of the legal tech categories are today. So having support ideally embedded inside of your product, which is so easy to do these days. So you can just, chat with somebody about a question, or having an online support forum that's easily available and consistently updated is critically important if you want to be successful on these products. If they don't have that, it's going to be probably very challenging.
Yeah. Stephanie, were you going to say something like that?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think, the quality of the support and service, that was critical. That was probably one of the top reasons that I have chosen vendors in the past. And I think also the response time and, depending on the nature of what the technology does and how sensitive the information can be, with Pacer Pro, if something is inadvertently filed by the attorney and that's out there, we need to be able to pull it back very quickly. So the response time, if it's a Friday night or a Saturday morning, has to be pretty immediate. It can't be the following Monday. So that was something that we definitely analyzed when we were talking to different vendors.
there's a comment or a question around smarter legal decisions around software providers in a state law that can be utilized in Canada. Any recommended market players? I'm not sure if they're actually asking about a state law software in Canada or about resources for buying software in Canada. But G2 is not limited to the United States, is it, Godard? I mean,
it's not. We do have about 15 categories of legal software. I'm not sure we have one specifically for estate software, but yeah.
Yeah. But if somebody who is looking for software in Canada could use your site in the same way they could use it in the United States or somewhere else.
And you can filter by region, so you find reviewers, in Canada, if they're available. But I'm not sure we have great coverage in that category for Canada yet. Yeah.
There's not a whole lot out there for estate planning software, actually, but there certainly is software that specializes in that area. We could, we are getting near we're past the little less shy of less than 15 minutes left in the program. So if you do have any questions you want to put to the panel, put them in the chat right now, because here's your chance. You've got some great panelists to talk to here. I was curious about one of the phenomena we've seen form over the last year or two, or a couple of different sites catered on the legal market that are attempting to facilitate both the piloting and the licensing around the piloting of software. Something like Rain in Court is one of them that some of you may have heard of, in which they make available basically containerized versions of products that firms can go in and try, and all of the licensing around deploying the pilot anyway is basically handled through them, so you don't have to get bogged down in that whole process. How is that? Is the licensing part of doing a pilot, how much is that an obstacle? How easy is that to do? How important is that to the process? Does anybody have experience with that? Yes, somebody's saying they put down a couple of questions under the Q&A tag. I don't see a Q&A tag, but.
Hey, Bob, could you please repeat the question? I lost connectivity for a bit.
Yeah, my question is really about the licensing issue in putting out a pilot. How much of an obstacle is that for a firm to have to get through? How much time does that consume? Yeah. How difficult is that for a firm to have to get through in order to just get a pilot going?
Yeah, I mean, to your point about Rain and Court, I mean, technology has advanced so much that if you're just talking about sheer software as a service, regardless of whether legal tech or not, there are a lot of things that are today available out of the box. Just like how it's easy to spin up your own SaaS platform over the weekend, licensing also falls under the same umbrella, where there are a lot of things that are provided out of the box for the customer. But then again, the question goes back to whether, if you're a big law firm, do you want to identify a small group that is willing to be agile to try out this containerized version of the software that your vendor is showcasing to you? Or if you're a boutique, then to the agility point, are you willing to give this a shot and see how this ripple effects into your organization? But regardless, I think the technology is able to provide through the vendors the options for customers to test the solution in an unprecedented way, right? So that's definitely not a blocker or an impediment. The harder part is again back to how the law firms want to fold this in, and what kind of shift they need to do within their organization to embrace this, at least for a time being, to see if it works or not for them.
Yeah. Now we can see Jack's questions. Thanks for republishing them, or whoever took care of that. But One of his questions is SOC 2 compliance. How important is SOC 2 compliance? What proportion of law firms are requiring it? And Donna, you spoke to this a little bit earlier, but can you address that?
Yep. So SOC 2 compliance is important, regardless of whether you're a boutique or a big law firm. The SOC 2 compliance ensures that the vendor has checked off a whole bunch of check boxes in terms of their security practices, in terms of how their internal processes work, in terms of providing transparency to their customers. So it's an umbrella that allows the vendor to build trust with the customer. And I think regardless of even legal tech, I would say anybody looking at technology, embracing a technology vendor from an enterprise standpoint should really give SOC 2 compliance consideration and importance.
100%.
Sorry?
No, I was going to say 100%. Totally. Sorry for interrupting, but that's like a really big deal.
Yeah. And in those RFPs that you get, Andy, are law firms talking about SOC 2 compliance?
No, not necessarily on. No, it's more like feature driven stuff.
Huh.
But that's my world. Like, because discovery is a weird space where law firms can play a little fast and loose with their clients' data, but when it comes to their stuff, they're more strict. It's weird. Law firms should be more SOC 2 compliant than anybody. They've kind of gone from legal minds to like legal databases, and they have all this information sitting in these databases there that's most likely in a fairly precarious state as it relates to SOC 2. And there's tools like Vanta.com. So if you're evaluating a legal tech software, primarily a cloud software, and they don't have SOC 2 compliance, like that should be a pretty big red flag, because getting SOC 2 compliance, at least today, is a lot easier than it was when we started doing it. Like we have a whole team, a compliance team, because we're dealing with very large entities and governments and stuff like that now. But when we started, these types of outsourced SOC 2 compliance auditors didn't exist, and now they do, and they're cost effective. So you don't need to hire somebody full time to do that if you're a legal tech startup.
Makes sense.
Do you also see ISO 27001? I mean, that's the other one, but maybe that's less relevant here.
No, rare. It's pretty rare we see that. I mean, that's the next level up to SOC 2.
Yep. So another question that Jack had here is, what are ways for vendors to support KM in driving engagement during a software pilot? In your experience, what has been helpful and what is not helpful? Andy or Donna, or yeah.
I can speak to that, sure.
Definitely, yeah.
From my experience, I think first you want to get in front of as many people as possible, be available, do one-on-ones, do as many demos as you can, group demos, record trainings, get it posted on the intranet pages, make my life or whoever is helping with the deployment easier. And by that, I mean, provide survey questions, email language that can be circulated, checklists, timelines, like anything that is going to help me have a smoother rollout process, and any recommendations that the vendor has, since they've gone through this, multiple times with other firms, I find to be really, really helpful. And just on the security point, from the last question, I would just note that sometimes the security review and approval process can be challenging just from a timeline perspective, especially if you're at a large firm. So when you're thinking at the outset about how to plan everything out, definitely give enough time for the coordination and communication with your law firm IT department so that they can go through their security policy and review process, which can take longer than you may think it will take.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I can add to that some tactics that I've seen work really well for these. And what I'm talking about here, just to be clear, is a more like a larger, more complicated rollout. We have more stakeholders, there's probably more money at risk, and this advice would not apply to smaller engagements. But having a main POC from the client side is critical. Friday weekly scheduled check-ins over the first, at least the first 30 days, but ideally 30, 60, 90, with an email list that is essentially summarizing what we call OKRs, objectives and key results, as defined either by the customer in advance or as part of the engagement process. You're like, okay, what problems are you trying to solve? And then how are we going to measure that? So you take a very scientific approach to it. And you might come to the table with those things. Oftentimes that's not the case. And that becomes like a job of sales and customer success to help define those. Like, okay, you want to reduce X to Y, that kind of stuff. And then that email summarizes the results. Like, okay, here's what's going on. That email is very, very helpful because you've got this small team of people that are trying to get this project to be successful. But then there's all these other voices, that want to know what's going on. And so you get that email and you can just forward it around. And so you keep kind of, everybody up to date in an async fashion. It makes things go much, much faster. And then we do some other stuff, like spreadsheets. You want to have a spreadsheet to monitor everything. But the email, the Friday sync, those things are invaluable.
Excellent. We just have a few more minutes left. Why don't we go around and share any kind of final words of advice or words of wisdom or thoughts that we may have for the audience on this topic, and then wrap up. So, Godard, let's start with you.
Yeah, no, I think, like I said at the beginning, I do think it's a very exciting time for the legal world, right? There's so many more great apps out there. And so I think, I would say, you can certainly check out G2 and, help you build your shortlist, see what technology is out there, what's working for other firms, and welcome your feedback. I'm Godard at G2. So if there's products missing or ways we can make it better, please send it my way.
Sounds good. And Stephanie, how about you?
Yeah, I guess I would say focus on really developing a strong relationship with your customers, because from my perspective, I see it as, I'm not just buying technology, I'm really establishing what's hopefully a long-term relationship with the provider. So to try to think about that long-term relationship rather than just like a limited one-time rollout or, product rollout.
Sounds good. Andy?
Yeah, I mean, we did a prep call about this last week, but I think there's some good alliteration to kind of keep in mind. You've got the people peer review side from Goddard's side, that's hugely impactful. And then the product side and then the process side. So kind of peer, product, process. And it's not a linear thing, it's more circular in nature. But if you can take that approach of, go research, learn, try these products, implement a good process around it. Like that is, in my opinion, that's the smartest way to procure software, which I think is the title of this discussion.
Right. The PPP approach.
The PPP approach, not the loan program, but the software procurement program.
Sounds good. Donna, you got the final word.
Awesome. It was really great talking to everyone, and I learned a lot of things in this conversation. I wanted to touch upon the one aspect that was discussed last, which is one more thing that that vendor evaluation should consider is the lock-in, because sure, you can try a pilot program with a vendor. It's from an enterprise security and network operations standpoint, it's important that you're able to undo if needed. So vendors get bonus points if they are able to ease themselves out as easily as they were able to get in. So I think the vendor lock-in should be an important consideration too. Another random point that comes to mind is, how I think someone mentioned lawyers are not engineers, but we've come to a point where pretty much everyone has to wear that software cap. It has become like your alphabets in kindergarten, where, regardless of the field, you're better off if you know a bit of software engineering. And we at PacerPro have a lot of such experts. You know who you are. And I think that's one of our strengths too, on the side note. But I wanted to close out saying that, customer centricity should be treated as everyone's problem. The shift in approach where regardless of what organization you are, And whether you're directly facing with customers or not, the questions you should be answering should point to some kind of customer-related metric that you're able to improve upon. So I think within the organization, it's everybody's business, and shift out as in, just like how you are providing a software solution as a vendor, there is also the missing gap between what the law firm wants and how they can embrace your solution, right? So that gap, I think, has to also be filled by the technology vendor when there is no such intermediary party. So I'm saying that we have to sort of blur our boundaries as needed to close the loop in that customer use case flow that helps with some kind of improvement, whether it's operational or process or work product.
Good advice. Thanks. Bonus points to Stephanie today for participating amid a COVID crisis in her household. So thank you so much for doing that. We really appreciate it. And thanks to all the panelists for participating today. Really appreciate all of your insights. And a big thanks to Pacer Pro for pulling this all together and producing this webinar. That's it for today. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.